Meantime, let's bring in Jeff Jacobowitz, a defense attorney who represented 3 White House officials during the Clinton presidency, and our other legal analysts are still with us as well. So, Jeff, let me just ask you kind of the broad brushstroke question, if you will. What have you heard so far from the prosecution in its testimony with Michael Cohen that the defense could try to capitalize on?
Well, you know, the defense is in a tough position because the only way to really contradict what Cohen has testified to would be testimony from Weisselberg or from Trump. And that is very unlikely to happen. And so then you have to attack Cohen's credibility. You have to call him a liar. You have to say that he continued to lie in the past. He pled guilty. He served time in jail. He's untrustworthy. And their defense will be the cross-examination.
So, Jeff, the fact that the defense has had relatively few objections during the entire process of the Cohen testimony, what does it tell you?
Well, you know, the thing is with leading questions, I know we've had a discussion on it, if the defense objects, the witness has heard the question, so he knows where the prosecution is going. It gives him time to formulate an answer. Once the objection is either denied or it's sustained, and the question is rephrased, he then knows the answer. And so an objection may not be very helpful, although most of the times defense counsel would object.
You said defense will all come in cross-examination, right? That is going to be the key moment for this defense to make an impression on the jury with Michael Cohen. We saw how they went about it with Stormy Daniels. What does Todd Blanche, the attorney who we're told will do the cross-examination this time, need to do differently with Michael Cohen than what we saw happen with Stormy Daniels, if anything?
Well, I think he has a lot more to work with Michael Cohen, because Michael Cohen has a history of for example, lying that Stormy Daniels did not have as much as Michael Cohen has done it. Now, Michael Cohen has said, well, he's done it to protect the president. And, you know, the testimony that has come out is that you have really a plethora of people around Donald Trump who are willing to lie for him. I mean, Hope Hicks's name came up, others' names have come up. And so Michael Cohen wasn't unusual in that respect, but he was basically in the lead to some degree.
Misty, right before that break, there was an objection called, and then there was a sidebar, essentially. What do you think this is about?
This was likely about the scope of the questions. It's about the scope of the testimony moving forward. The defense is always going to try and limit what's going to come out there on the record. And, of course, this particular question, what would you have said had you cooperated with the investigation, has a lot of issues because it's complete speculation. But also, it's going to set the tone for what the testimony is going to be moving forward. And the defense wants to talk about that with the judge and the prosecution about what the scope of questioning is going to be. And I actually think the prior sidebar related to that as well, because we were hearing about the federal filing, the FEC, and we were hearing about Jeff Sessions. And I think the defense said, we need to figure out where this is going and limit what's actually going to come out before the jury.
And Jeff, coming back to the expected cross-examination, we just reported before the break that Trump was passing notes to his defense attorney, Todd Blanche, who'll be doing the cross-examination here. And earlier in this trial...
Anna, you're breaking up on me? I'm sorry.
Earlier in this trial, we'll make sure you get the audio.
Yes.
I'll talk to one of our other defense attorneys in the meantime. Danny, I'll turn it to you, or Misty, chime in again. But with Todd Blanche getting these notes from Donald Trump, earlier reporting that Trump was unhappy, was griping about his defense attorney, Todd Blanche, not being aggressive enough during the trial, wanting him to do a little more of the attack style, maybe the attack style we saw with, Susan Neckles going after Stormy Daniels. I mean, how does a defense attorney manage a client like Trump and do what he wants, but still in a way that's really in his best interest in the court of law?
Here's what defense attorneys will tell you if they're being honest. Every time you see a defendant reaching over and pulling on the sleeve of his attorney or handing them a note, exactly 2 to 3% of the time is it relevant or helpful. 98% of the time, it's completely useless. And it's frustrating. And this is something I take very personally, because it's frustrating because as an attorney on trial, you are ultra focused. Your life goes by the wayside. You're on trial all day. You know, there's an earlier question about watching the jury during direct. No, there may be no other moment of focus quite like direct examination and cross-examination for an attorney. Trial is all encompassing. So you say to your client, as a defense attorney, look, I'll handle the exhibits, the witnesses. I'll handle your gag order hearings, everything else. You just sit there and look not guilty. And whatever you do, don't bother me. And it's remarkable to me that, it's remarkable to me that clients will not heed that sound advice over and over and over again. But look, I think defense attorneys will tell you the note passing and the pulling on your sleeve is relevant maybe 1 to 2 to 3% of the time. Misty, there it is.
There it is. Donald Trump is back in the courtroom. I presume that it's going to get underway in just minutes. But Maya, just thinking of what Danny was talking about, this is such an unusual case in every way, right? But then to be bombarded with all of this information, I mean, this is such a public world. And thinking about the fact that this witness is saying that the Attorney General of the United States of America was in cahoots with the President of the United States of America with this attorney. It's so, how do people process something like this?
Well,
Yes.
So, look, I think that part of what we're seeing going on here, right, is that given that this is the first criminal trial of a former president of the United States, and it is relating to whether or not there was an effort to conceal an agreement to have an impact, to interfere with the very election this former president ran, means everybody's kind of processing this as, what does this really mean?
Yeah.
It's a historic moment. It's not great history for us. It's not the kind of history we want to make as a country. But you have to, and thinking to Danny's point, you know, Blanche has to be sitting there knowing he's carrying the weight of history on his shoulders, and he is going to go down in history in some kind of way. And this, with the former president pulling his coattails while he's trying to process these massive issues that are coming up in real time, to Danny's point, I think is doing a disservice to Donald Trump. He's doing his own disservice to himself.
Jury's coming back in.
Yep, I want to real quick ask one last question to Jeff Jacobowitz, who we now reestablish a connection with before we let you go. Jeff, as we prepare again for cross-examination, we have all this color about Trump and his, trying to get his attorney's attention, who's preparing for the cross-examination. If you are doing the cross-examination here, how are you going at Michael Cohen? Not just trying to reveal or catch him in a lie, talk about his inconsistencies, but are you going to try to do something to try to get under his skin, to try to get some kind of reaction from him, knowing he has a tendency to speak very passionately, right?
Well, clearly you're going to want to try to make him lose his temper, and he has a temper. And everybody knows that. And they're going to try to get under his skin. They know a lot of personal details about Michael Cohen. They will bring it in. Trump probably knows everything about Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen has done time in jail. Everybody knows who he is. Everybody knows what faults he has. And you can use that on cross-examination. And let me just say this as a side note. I know we lost each other for a little bit. I saw basically the U.S. Congress walking into the courtroom to be there for Donald Trump. Not the whole U.S. Congress, obviously, but we have the gag order that was just approved by the appellate court. And if Trump is feeding any of these congressmen or senators information to talk about, that violates the gag order. And that's something that the judge will want to know and may have a hearing on it. And it could violate other gag orders in other cases that are pending now. And so that's a serious thing. And the Court of Appeals decision is something that has to be taken seriously.